Hello and welcome to Who Watches the World Cup and our episode on Group B. We recorded this a few days before the Euros started, but today it is... What day is it, Dave?
It's Sunday the 13th.
Sunday the 13th, so it's the day after Group B played their first games. Obviously, Denmark's first game was marred by, the tragic situation surrounding Christian Eriksen. We've made sure that we have the most up-to-date news before we release the episode, and so we don't say anything stupid. But just so those listening know, none of that had happened when we initially recorded this episode. So if we say anything disrespectful to Christian Eriksen, then I apologise, but I don't think we do.
I don't think we do, no.
I think we've just seen he's a good player.
Yeah.
So yes, if that's why it's not mentioned. Obviously, all of us here the two of us who watches the World Cup are wishing Christian Eriksen the best. And we will wait to see what happens with the tournament before we kind of circle back round and go more in depth on what happened there. So please enjoy the episode and we'll see you for Group C. Hello and welcome to Kasper Cast, the only podcast where we exclusively talk about the Danish hunk that is Kasper Schmeichel. Ooh, baby. With me as always, to drool over that Danish keeper is Dave Bryan. Dave, are you feeling sexy today?
Sexier now. I'm hearing like smooth sax music in the background in my head.
Yeah, when I edit in the theme song for this, I might swap for a bit of Marvin Gaye while I'm at it. No, I'm sorry to disappoint all of you sexy listeners that have come for Kaspercast, but this is Who Watches the World Cup, the only podcast in the internet that I have heard that compares the international politics with the teams competing in this year's Euro Tournament 2020. Dave, conveniently, Kaspercast is also on Group B, the group that includes sexy Denmark, fantastic Finland, brilliant Belgium, and rubbish Russia.
I wondered what you were going to do for that.
Yeah, thank you. So let's jump straight into some football. What do you make of Group B? Is this a balanced group? Russia are a team that we thought weren't going to perform particularly well in the World Cup in 2018, and then surprised us actually. We started off being reasonably negative on the team, and then by the end of it, the hosts did pretty well. So what do you make of this group?
Yeah, that was a surprise actually at the last World Cup, and it goes a lot can be said for being the host and having that extra something it gives you. This group, I feel differently about it now that I've looked into it more than I did at first glance. At first glance, and even when you look into it more, you're thinking Belgium are going to go through first. That's kind of a given unless something goes terribly, terribly wrong. And, Finland are the minnows, and, they're probably just happy to be there. So
right.
You don't expect them necessarily to pull off any results, but, it's fun. It's nice that they're there. And then I guess Denmark and Russia are the two that I would say are a bit more evenly matched.
So we're definitely favouring Belgium to top the group. That seems to be, it could have been any of the major teams in this one, right? When they pull it out, it could have been France, yeah, they're going to top it. It could have been Germany, yeah, they'd probably top it. It just happens in this group that Belgium got the draw, right? None of the rest of the group are really challenging a major European.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure when the draw was made, Belgium were like, sweet, I think we're guaranteed to be into the knockout rounds now. Nothing's really going to trouble us here.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go straight for Belgium then. They're one of the favourites for the tournament, as they have been for every tournament. Are they still ranked the number one team in the world by the coefficient?
I would expect them to be. Yeah. I don't.
Yeah. Even though they've actually, they haven't successfully won a major tournament yet, and they're kind of hungry to do so while they've got this golden generation. What do you make of the Belgian squad this year, and why is Jeremy Doku, Count Dooku's son, most likely to claim Young Player of the Tournament?
Who are you talking about?
Jeremy Doku. Do you know Dave? Do you not know Jeremy Doku?
I don't know Jeremy Doku.
My goodness! Well, let me tell you why I know. I know Jeremy Doku because other awful commentary fans will know of Steve, who I created the channel with. We did the European Super Cup episode together, and many, many things on the Awful Commentary YouTube channel. And our school friend Alex, who we just released a Let's Play on Football Manager with. Me, Steve, and Alex did a multiplayer Football Manager group together, where we all picked a team in Belgium with the idea of getting the Belgian league ranked as highly as other European tournaments. Right. So we all took a Belgian squad, and we didn't take one of the major ones, we took one of the minor ones to try and get Belgian football to be better recognised. And my dream player was Anderlecht's Jeremy Doku. We started playing, we did this during lockdown, I think, while I was actually still living in Russia. And Jeremy Doku, at the time, he was 19 years old, so this was last year or the year before. He's 19 years old, he plays for Anderlecht, he's clearly a relative of Christopher Lee's Count Dooku.
I mean, of course. The spelling is not important.
No. Come on, Doku, there's no way. There's no way, it's Dooku.
Maybe he didn't want to trade, a bit like Nicolas Cage. You know, like he was born Nicholas Coppola, but didn't want to trade off the Coppola family name, so he changed it ever so slightly to Cage. Jeremy's done the same thing and gone, I don't want to trade off the legacy of my Sith Lord father. I'm going to just knock out one of those O's and make a legacy of my own.
Yes, yeah, and now that I've spoken enough bullshit about Jeremy Doku for you to have a chance to look up who he is there anything there? Because I've seen him being spoken about this year. I was like, when he came up and people were talking about him as a young prospect for this tournament, I was like, yes, Jeremy Doku is back. He's back in my life.
Back in all of our lives. I'll be honest, I haven't really heard much about him. I know he plays for Rennes in League. Now.
He left Anderlecht.
Yeah, but he played a good 30 games for them in League. Scored a couple of goals. He's still only 19. Looks like Liverpool, if you believe the rumour mill, are interested in having a look at him. But yeah, no, I hadn't picked him out as a standout name when I was looking through the squad.
Well, I'm glad to see that he's getting some recognition, and a move to the Premier League would be huge for me.
Yeah.
If Jeremy Doku moved to the Premier League, that would be great.
Life, yeah.
Yes, yeah. So there are a bunch of Belgian players that I like. Famously, I'm a big supporter of the Belgian squad from previous tournaments and this one as well. We all know who the best Hazard brother is. We don't even really need to go into that. It's Thorgan. But what do you make of the Belgian squad itself?
It's got to be... it's sort of in line with how they are one of the favourites in terms of their run-in and their results and their ranking. Their squad is pretty impressive. They've got some real world-class players in there and some strength in depth. I remember we talked a lot about Eden Hazard, the lesser Hazard at the World Cup.
The lesser, yeah. And he's barely even a Hazard.
Barely. Well, yeah. There's one of those two brothers who's making the family proud, and one of them is not. But
Eden.
Yeah, Eden. And Eden Hazard was the captain of the Belgian team and the World Cup, and obviously they went all the way to the semi-finals. But since he's left Chelsea, he's been ravaged by injuries, poor form. No one's really talking about him because he's kind of just vanished. He's not playing football. So it's almost, I wouldn't say actually it's a surprise he's been selected for the squad because he is, a huge name and he's not currently injured as far as I'm aware. But I almost wouldn't put him as a shoe-in to start for Belgium. But then you look at the quality throughout the rest of the squad. Kevin De Bruyne being the most pertinent one, and what I was reading today is that there's a chance he might start their first game after that injury he got in the Champions League final. They were saying maybe he would miss some of the group games, but there's a chance he might be playing now. And you've got Romelu Lukaku, informed striker, and dangerous, huge dude, amazing quality, great finisher, great strength. Just he's in my fantasy team. Like there was no way I couldn't put him in there. But then they've just got this great kind of balance in the team. A couple of good central midfield players and Yuri Tillemans and Axel Witsel, who will be the kind of the pivot there. Thibaut Courtois is their goalkeeper, and I've not ever really liked him. He's obviously very good, but there's something about him that I've always, I don't know, it just rubs me up the wrong way. There's something about his...
Is it the team he plays for?
It may be that he moved to Real Madrid, but I don't know. I don't really care about that. And if anything, with their strength in attack, not just with Lukaku, but with other attacking players like your boy Doku and and Dries Mertens,
Jeremy Doku,
the Hazards and all that. I think if they have a weakness, it's in their defence, and only really because we've talked about with the Group A episode, some squads maybe ageing out of their best generation, and we're not quite there yet with Belgium. But with their defenders, they're two of their first choice centre halves are still Toby Alderweireld and Jan Vertonghen, who are in their early to mid 30s. Thomas Vermaelen, I think he's even older. He's also in the squad. He's been playing in Japan for the last I don't know how many years. But so in their solid central defence, they have a great amount of experience, but maybe their fitness or their legs might be a bit of a weakness. But going forwards in the wing back positions, they're still exciting there. So Belgium may be a team that will score more goals than you, kind of thing.
So is this a case where you've got your central defenders, you've got 3 of them, so you're pretty shored up, in that area, but you're hoping not to get hit on the counter. You're hoping not to get ball. You're not going to play a high line because you don't want your central defenders to get the ball lobbed over them. But if you do, you've got your Thorgan Hazard, who's hopefully going to have a little bit of pace to kind of shore up any
I don't know.
Physical issues your central defence might have.
Does he play at the back? You might know more about him than I did. I kind of picture him as more of a forward-thinking player.
Well, I always think that as well. But if you've got Thorgan Hazard and Eden Hazard, they both generally tend to be midfielders on the left, right? Or almost attacking midfielders.
Yeah.
On the left. But you can't miss one of the Hazard brothers if you've got them both. You can't even lose the lesser one because he's the captain.
I mean, wouldn't it be terrific if... Well, I don't know if he is the captain for the squad this time around, but wouldn't it be terrific if he gets picked, Thorgan gets picked over Eden because of the form that they're in? There's no doubt that Thorgan's had a better season, and they tend to play a big Rom up top, number 9, and then De Bruyne sort of supporting left, and then someone else... De Bruyne supporting right and someone else supporting left, and that could well be... I think if you're going to go by reputation, you probably do pick Eden, and then maybe you can put Thorgan as that left wing back going up and down. And you're right, if he might lend a hand in defence, but I see him way more as a... He's not going to want to do that tracking back. Because on the right-hand side, I think they're likely to play Thomas Meunier from Dortmund, who is a up and down, more traditional or classic wing back. I mean, it'd be a massive call if they leave Eden Hazard out, even if he doesn't really deserve to start.
I'm going to leave the politics of Belgium for the moment, because I think they're probably going through, right? Unless we see a major upset, in which case we'll dissect what happened to them in the future anyway. Sure. Chances are we'll have the chance to talk about Belgium some more in the future. So, good squad, probably going to win. Let's move on.
Yeah, I expect they'll get to the semi-final again, at least.
Yeah. Well, let's go from one of my favourite teams to one of my favourite players. And our eyebrows are doing a roller coaster right now. Now, people might be confused when I said welcome to Caspercast, because, of course, everyone knows that I have the world's biggest crush on Kasper Schmeichel. But they may have been thinking, Dominic, are you actually talking about Danish coach Kasper Schmeichel? And I would say, no, I'm not, but I could be.
Is he also handsome?
Well, he's also called Kasper, which is
good enough.
That's pretty much it. I'll tell you what, while we're talking, because if I have to be a little bit honest, I don't know what Kasper Schmeichel looks like. So while you run me through the Danish squad, and while you're doing that, I'll get you rate the Danish squad. I'll rate the Danish coach.
Okay. Well, we'll start with Kasper. Obviously, he's not just. Sorry, I said his name.
Sorry, my heart's a flutter.
Yeah, he's their leader as well as their number one goalkeeper and arguably their most important player. I think he's just as important for Denmark as he has been for Leicester over the last, God knows, how long has he been there? 10 years or something.
This is the second player today who's on my fantasy football squad as well.
Yeah,
Thorgan Hazard, of course, and Kasper Schmeichel both on. Yeah,
good calls. So he's there at the back, and the way I look at the Danish squad is that they've got quite a lot of surprisingly good players. It's just that the further forward you go, the more sporadically they're spread out, and the less confidence you would have in them. So you've got Kasper at the back, so he can organise and he's going to make saves and he's big. They're likely to play three at the back, and if they do, they've got Joachim Andersen, who played at Fulham last year and was came in on loan, then took the captain's armband and led them quite admirably, even though they ended up getting relegated. Andreas Christensen from Chelsea, and you've got Simon Kjaer from Milan. Like, those are three pretty solid centre halves, and I think any team would be glad to have them. And you've also got Yannick Vestergaard from Saints, so they've kind of got four good centre halves that might be all competing for for 2 or 3 places. And then obviously you've got Christian Eriksen. They're number 10, they're kind of talisman, the one that they'll look to try and create things, supported by Pierre-Emerick Højbjerg in sort of a holding defensive midfielder role, and he's been pretty impressive, I think, since he's moved from Southampton to Spurs. But then when you get up front, that's where I start to wonder where their goals might come from. Like, sure, you might have some pretty solid defenders, and you might have a good goalkeeper, and you've got a good screen in front of the defence, and then you've got Christian Eriksen. But who's Christian Eriksen got to work with here?
Right.
Like with Inter Milan, he's had Romelu Lukaku to feed, and I don't know how much he's actually played. I know there was a lot of controversy around his move from Spurs, and then he never got played at Milan. But maybe that's changed in the last year when they won the Serie A.
Yeah, from the little bit that I know, from having done some tiny bits of research, he was on the transfer list at Milan in January. Conte was like ready to get rid of him. And then by the end of the season, he'd somehow managed to turn it around, and was like praised for the role that he played in helping Milan win. So at the beginning, he was disposable and they were like ready to get rid of him. But by the end, he's grown into form. And I got a little quote here where he says, after they just won Serie A, "I never thought it would be easy. I've turned it around and now I've even won the championship. I am really pleased." So,
wow.
Good for you.
He's a very
Eriksen.
enthusiastic guy, isn't he? I am very pleased.
That was my reading of him, to be fair. But he's it says here where it's talking about him that he's publicity shy.
Yeah.
He's not known for being cocky. People like him because he's a bit more reserved. And obviously it's like he was absolutely vital in that Spurs squad that went to the Champions League final.
For sure.
Right, and then he left, and then they got worse, and then they got worse, and then they got worse, and he got worse, and then it's good that, in this last couple of months he's been able to make it happen.
Yeah, I'm happy for him. I think he's a good player, and I like that he's a bit more reserved and doesn't seem to be very up himself. And I think Spurs wouldn't have let him go if they didn't have Dele Alli, who I think they thought was going to mature and fill the gap of that creative playmaker role, but then his form has been so sporadic over the last couple of years, and he seems to be a very confidence-driven player. So I like Dele Alli. I want him to come good. But Christian Eriksen will make this Danish team tick if the guys around him are worthy of all the effort and the quality that he has. Because I see they've got up front, they've got Martin Braithwaite, who's a bit part player at Barcelona, and Yusuf Poulsen at RB Leipzig, who's quite a talented guy. But they've got no one to rely on up there. So I think if we look at their games at the end of the group stage, we might find they don't get slaughtered by anybody, except maybe Belgium. If Belgium, I think, want to turn it on. If they just decide they want to score 6 goals, they might do. But otherwise, I think it'll be the Danish games will be quite tight. But I just don't see them scoring many. That when they in their qualification, they're in the same qualification group as Switzerland, which I said in the last episode was quite a tight group. And neither Switzerland finished top, Denmark second, and Denmark only won half their games. They won 4, drew 4, and I think they just didn't lose any somehow miraculously, which got them through ahead of the Republic of Ireland. And I think they went to Georgia and drew 0-0. I mean,
right?
They beat them 5-1 at home, but then they go there to Georgia and draw 0-0, and I think they drew away to the Republic of Ireland as well. So that you can't always expect goals from them. So before I looked into this properly, I thought that maybe Denmark would be looking at us getting through second place behind Belgium, but now I'm not so sure.
Oh, interesting. Okay. And this, I mean, they've got a bit of an advantage here because the group, half the games are being played in Russia and half the games, I think, are being played in Denmark.
Yeah, their first game against Finland is in Copenhagen.
Right. So that's going to be like a definite advantage for them. As you're saying, they beat Georgia 5-1 at home and then went away and suffered a bit. But like they do have the advantage of the home field for their matches. In fact, even when they play Russia for the away leg, it's also in Copenhagen. So it seems like actually they never even have to leave. They don't have to travel at all, which is pretty convenient for them.
Yeah,
I would imagine
that certainly will maybe play out as a bit of an advantage. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to Finland then, because otherwise I'm going to have to tear myself away from Kasper. Kasper Hjulmand, by the way, not bad, not a bad older man. 49 years old. He's kept himself fit. He's active, handsome. He's a handsome older man.
Well, that's good. I look forward to any of the cutaways to the bench during the Finland games that we watch, and so you can be a bit giddy about it.
Yeah, people to keep your eyes out for. Kasper Schmeichel, great keeper, won the FA Cup for Leicester.
Yeah.
Christian Eriksen, can he deliver for the national team? Kasper Hjulmand, Silver Fox. All right, Finland then. What do you make of the Finns?
They're an underdog that I hope don't get embarrassed, because like I said, they'll be glad just to be there. They haven't ever qualified for Euros before.
Is it their first one?
First ever Euros.
Wow.
So I kind of just want them to enjoy themselves and have a good time. And maybe like we've seen in other major tournaments in the World Cup and the last Euros, sometimes these small countries can upset bigger teams. And I would love it if they did a bit of an Iceland and just kind of caught the world by surprise, captured their imaginations, and everyone kind of like Finland become everyone's second team kind of thing. But in terms of their quality and football, they're surely going to finish bottom of the group. I can't see them doing much here. They've got Teemu Pukki as their striker, who can score goals for fun in the Championship for Norwich. But then when he had that last season before the one we just finished, when they were in the Premiership, he couldn't. He had a good start to the season, then he just tailed off. But back in the Championship again, he can score them for fun. So he's got some. I was going to say pedigree, but he's definitely got some skills to poach some goals. So if they get lucky, he's kind of the guy you would kind of want on the team. Glenn Kamara just won the Scottish Premier League with Rangers this year, and he was a real standout performer in central midfield. And I don't know, there's not really much more you can pick and choose. They've got some players who play in like the American second division for Minnesota United.
No.
And the
MLS 2.
Whatever that is.
I'm not sure it's not called that. Yeah.
And they've got one of
the 2LS.
One of their goalkeepers plays for Bristol Rovers.
Yeah! Now we're talking. Managed by Joey Barton. They've just been relegated, managed by Joey Barton, who is now having to go to Sheffield for a court appearance because he beat up a guy.
But it's been delayed until November because the video Skypey whatever thing broke. They couldn't do the trial, so he's...
Everything about that is a travesty.
I couldn't tell. I wasn't sure when I brought up Bristol Rovers, because I know there's Bristol Rovers and Bristol City, one of which you hate. And okay, so Bristol City you hate, Bristol Rovers you're okay with.
Yeah!
And then Bath City beat them, trumped them both.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In this household, well, actually we're divided. We're divided between two of us, North Bristol boys, which is Bristol Rovers, and then one of us, my disgusting brother, is a South Bristol boy, which means Bristol City. But
it's so divided and it's so close knit.
Yeah, but then Bath City,
they bring you all together.
Perfection.
Yeah. Well, Finland, could maybe surprise some people. That they obviously got here. They qualified second in their group behind Italy, who ran away with it. They were the other team that won all 10 games. So Finland got through ahead of Greece and ahead of Bosnia, and then the two dummy teams in that group, Armenia and Liechtenstein. So they lost to Italy, and I think they lost one of their games to Bosnia. But otherwise, they put together a good string of results to get here. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they play on the big stage.
Okay, that's interesting. So there's no one here that you see other than Pukki, who, like, again, much like Eriksson, seems to be a kind of like a reserved, humble kind of player.
Yeah.
Like it says here, after he scored his first Premier League hat-trick, he went straight home to look after his daughter, having promised his wife she could go out for the evening. So he...
What a fucking sweetheart.
Yeah. Look, I know I just scored a hat-trick in the biggest league on the planet, but you got to have girls' night. So that doesn't mean that other players didn't come over and party at Pukki's place.
PPP.
PPP, party at Pukki's place.
Speaking of... Sorry, go on.
I was say, speaking of parties at Pukki's place, it might be time to bring up Pussy Riot.
Really? That's earlier than I was expecting them to come up in this episode.
Well, unless you've got anything more to say about Finland.
Nothing that should derail our segue into Pussy Riot.
Because there's only one team in Russia that we're supporting this year, and it's Pussy Riot!
Pussy Riot!
Russia.
Yes.
Russia, Euro 2020. In the World Cup, we said, these may be the weakest host since Qatar, 4 years in the future. And then they did a remarkable job. We went into it slandering the country, slandering the team, saying they got nothing to offer. It's a dictatorship. By the end of it, you were like, I've come around on this team, and then I moved there. So it was an interesting turn of events.
It was, yeah, and brave of you to spend a whole summer slandering the most powerful, arguably the most powerful man on the planet, and then moving to his country for shortly.
Yeah,
after.
Well, that's the kind of balls to the walls action that my life was before the pandemic. No, so actually it all kind of coincided with the World Cup, because when we recorded the 2018 World Cup, I was living in the south of China. I was living in Xiamen. And then at the end of the World Cup, people who may have just listened to the World Cup final episode will hear that me and Dave were in the same house, because I returned from China back to the UK for the summer. It was a very interesting summer, very traumatic in many ways, but the World Cup was great. But then on my way back to start teaching at the end of the summer, back to China, I stopped in at Moscow to visit a friend who was living there, and then realized actually I was desperately in love with her, and that we wanted to be together. And she lived in Moscow, and that was basically the end of the conversation. So I left China and moved to Russia. Unfortunately, after a year and a half in the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic. The pandemics have a way of ruining relationships, it turns out. But what it meant was that all of the things that I had said about Russia in the summer before, where I was like, oh, it's a country that's like this, and it's like this, and the news says it's like this, and if you watch the BBC, they'll tell you A, and in America, they'll tell you B, and then you talk to a Russian person, and they're like, that's not what Russia's really like. But then I lived there, so I got to see what was true and what wasn't true. And I was there for long enough to really know the country pretty solidly. And to make loads of Russian friends that I really value, like really, really, really good people, and to have met exactly the kind of people you would expect.
The negative stereotypes come true.
Yes, yeah. And Russia is one of those interesting countries where, like, I really loved my time living in Moscow before the pandemic came. And I loved, like, all of the friends that we made over there were really awesome. But when it came time to leave, it was like, yeah, that's fine. And I'm not in a particular hurry to go back.
Well, hopefully there's no need to.
Yes, yeah, this is true. Yeah, these days there's definitely not. So, the Russian national team.
Da.
What do you make of this national team? Because before the last World Cup, in the World Cup, you're saying, and then they surprised us. Did the last World Cup give them a boost, or have the players moved around? Are there more influential players this time? What's it looking like?
Now that you mention that, it would have been great to compare this squad to the last one, because I think we spoke about last time that so many of the Russian team play for their local football in Russia. They don't play much around Europe. And looking at the squad now, that does still seem to be the case. I can see a few that are scattered around. I can see Atalanta, I can see Valencia, I can see Monaco, but for the most part, they all still do play their football in Russia. And the most heartbreaking thing that I don't know if you've noticed, that I have to bring you to attention otherwise, is that there is no Igor Akinfeev this time.
That is a loss on par with the loss of my relationship.
Well, let me pose you this question.
Yeah. What would, if I had to choose between my ex and Igor Akinfeev, which would I go with? It's a tough choice.
I think I've got an even tougher decision for you. If Igor Akinfeev was at this tournament, who would you have as your fantasy goalkeeper?
Kasper Schmeichel.
Oh, okay, that wasn't even hard.
Yes, if it was maybe more than 5 years ago, 10 years ago, Akinfeev, no doubt.
Every day.
But the reason that he's not at this tournament is because he's about 500 years old.
No, he's only 35. But he retired from international football after the last World Cup.
Right. That seems like going out on a high.
Yeah, I suppose so. But he was young. Like, goalkeepers can play way into their late 30s if they stay healthy. And he's still playing for CSK Moscow. Bloody hell. He's been there since 2002 and he's played 485 games.
Yeah, that's why he was big on Championship Manager.
But then you ripped him away from his homeland. You ripped him away from CSK Moscow to play for whatever team you signed him for.
I played as Chuska. I played as...
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
and then I probably got him for Aston Villa or something. No, I got Joe Hart for Aston Villa because Joe Hart was a good player and the Premier League ruined him.
Oh yeah, he had a sad descent, didn't he? Bless him.
Yeah,
I like Joe Hart a lot.
Yeah, me too.
But anyway, even without Akinfeev, they've got, I think, probably a similar thing to what I said last time. They've got a few players that may well be a bright spark that can make things happen, but maybe I'm thinking about it the wrong way. Maybe what made them so good last time was the fact that they were just a team without any big stars, and they pulled together and they did it all. But then who knows? Maybe the World Cup was a blip, was a fluke, was whatever magic and influences and pressures are on them at that tournament. Obviously benefited them, but now without all of that, without that home team pressure, do they actually have the quality to go and do it? I know they've got. I think their first game against Belgium is in St. Petersburg, isn't it? So they may have a bit of that home field advantage that did them so well 3 years ago. But if I'm going to pick out a few players, I like Alexander Golovin. He's one of the players who's gone away from Russian football. He plays in Monaco, and I think I did even shouted him out before the World Cup, and then he didn't actually do much. But a player who did do a fair bit in that World Cup, and I think he's going to be really influential this time. And he's in my fantasy team, or was.
Oh, nice.
I think maybe he got displaced at the last minute, but Artem Dzyuba, giant centre forward, I think he's a real handful. And as he showed in the World Cup, he's not just a big dude who can win headers. He had a great touch and scored a good few goals. So, whereas if I was going to compare them to Denmark, I think Russia might find goals easier to come by. If not, that they might leak a few more. Mario Fernandez, one of their defenders, does play for CSKA Moscow, is a kind of marauding right wing back. So he may be very helpful in creating goals, but maybe the defensive part of his game is not his strength. I found it difficult to pick between Denmark and Russia, who would really be most likely to go through in second place behind Belgium. Right now I feel like I'm leaning towards Russia, and Russia and Belgium are actually in the same qualification group for this tournament, and Russia were comfortably in second place. Obviously, Belgium dicked it, won all 10 of their games, and then Russia won 8 of their 10 games. The only games they lost were against Belgium, so they came 9 points ahead of third place Scotland, who got through on that third place qualification thing. Yeah, I think I'm talking myself around to going for Russia to finish second in this group.
Right, so your prediction for the group, most likely, Belgium, Russia, Denmark, Finland.
Yes.
That's how you see it
That's
playing
how
out.
I can picture it playing out, although, like I said, we'd love to see some magical underdog story with Finland upsetting some of the bigger countries, but it's unlikely. Let's say that much.
Okay. Yeah, I'm hoping that Denmark managed to get their way through for obvious reasons. More Kasper, more kisses is my motto.
And more points for your fantasy team if you.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that. So anyone who's listened to the last episode of Who Watches the World Cup, the World Cup final, 2018, will know it was a great game. France v Croatia. France tore away with it in the end, but Croatia put up a valiant fight. Unfortunately, too valiant for England, who have to face them again in Group D. But there was something that kind of overshadowed the final a little bit, and it wasn't the rainstorm, Dave. Very funny shadow joke there by me. But the punk band Pussy Riot invaded the pitch and made a little bit of a scene in front of Putin and the world. You spent some of today listening to Pussy Riot songs in preparation for this. Yeah. So what did you make of Russia's most influential punk band?
My first thought was that this isn't really punk music. And then I went, well, it's not like within the genre of punk. You wouldn't listen to it. If you wanted to listen to some punk music, as you would imagine it, you wouldn't listen to Pussy Riot, but they're very punk in their attitude and their statements. So you kind of can forgive it when most of their music sounds like electro, dance, pop, those kind of vibes. So I was enjoying it, even though it's not the sort of thing I've normally listened to. But before we started recording, I had one of them on that we were grooving to.
Yeah, I got a video of that.
Oh, did you? Okay, maybe that can go up on YouTube. I've got no shame. So they got some cool tracks actually. That song was called Such a Dick. I also liked one called Police State. There were others that we mentioned back in that World Cup final episode called Sexist and Make America Great Again, which kind of feel more in that sort of punk sensibility, if not the punk music kind of ballpark.
Yeah. If I rated the Caspers, how do you rate Pussy Riot?
In what sense?
Well, you can't compare them to the Caspers, really, because I'm very much objectifying Kasper Schmeichel.
Yeah, which we're allowed to do, but we're not allowed to objectify Pussy Riot.
No, that would directly go against Pussy Riot. And also, I'm not sure that I know what they look like other than pink ski masks.
Yeah. So, yeah. If anything, that's great. It's like, are you familiar with Billie Eilish?
Yes.
Contemporary pop sensation. I think she's changed her style recently, but throughout the first few years of her career, when she was humongous as a star, she wore like big baggy clothes intentionally so that no one could objectify her based on her body. She could only be judged on her music and what she says, and that's it. What people kind of should be judged on. And I thought that I think that's really cool. And Pussy Riot are kind of a similar thing where it's like it doesn't matter that we're women and we're in music, and the music industry tends to favour women who look a certain way, whatever is within the zeitgeist. I'm going to use the word zeitgeist again. Zeitgeist. I've just learned it recently. Maybe that's why. It's about what they do and about what they say that matters.
Yeah, and if anyone has something to say, it's Pussy Riot. What's really amazing about Pussy Riot as well is that normally punk bands have a relatively short shelf life. Like the Sex Pistols, famous and influential as they were, only really operated for about 3 or 4 years before they broke up and, Sid Vicious killed his partner and then overdosed, and Johnny Rotten went off and formed Pill, and like the Sex Pistols, like big and powerful as they were, like didn't last, because the thing with punk music is it's built on energy. It's like a supernova. It's going to it's going to expand until there's nothing left.
Yeah, I think a similar thing happened in the US with Black Flag.
Yeah.
They were huge, and at least in the punk scene, and even people who would never go see a punk go see a Black Flag gig or even a punk gig, they would have heard of Black Flag just because their influence was spreading and their, exactly what you mean. But then they only lasted maybe 10 years in the form that they were in. I think less, actually, to be fair, the real, because Henry Rollins joined a few years into their run, and then he was only their lead man for, I don't know, probably less than 10 years, 5-6 years.
Yeah. Well, talking about Pussy Riot, like, as a band that have lasted for such a long time, they've had such an ongoing presence and international influence. Like, the fact that we're able to talk about a feminist Russian punk band goes to show just how powerful they've been. But it also kind of leads into what I wanted to talk about today with Russia and Putin, and kind of continuing our conversation from 2018. Like, if you haven't listened to what we said about Russia in the 2018 World Cup, it's worth having a listen. I think it was our first ever episode. There was a lot to talk about at that point. But one of the reasons that the Pussy Riot have been so prominent is that every time they do something, they get arrested. And after the World Cup pitch invasion, I think they were in prison for like 50 days or something like that, I seem to remember. They keep doing these big stunts and they keep being punished for them. And that's the reason that they can keep doing it, is because they keep doing stuff and then the reaction is so overt in an attempt to silence them that it makes what they've done echo louder. And that's very much the case with today's topic, Alexei Navalny, who you may have heard a little bit about on the news this year.
I've seen the name. I don't really read the news much, I'll be honest.
Well, then get ready for a thrill ride of Russian proportions. Alexei Navalny is an interesting person whose influence and fame has been massively expanded because of the actions that the Kremlin has taken against him. This kind of goes back as well to something that I used to say when I was living in China, which is that authoritarian governments that stamp down on free speech exponentially only manage to make things worse for themselves. And a really nice example of that was in China, where there was that famous picture of Chinese President Xi Jinping walking next to Barack Obama, back when Obama was president. And Obama is a tall, skinny, fit man. And President Xi was smaller than him, a bit shorter, 10, 15 years older. So he's got like a little bit of old man stomach, but he's in good shape, but he's just an older man, right? And so after there was that image of them walking next to each other, people went, wait a minute, they look like Winnie the Pooh and Tigger. And so all of these memes erupted over Chinese social media, over Twitter, over everything, of Xi and Obama replaced with Pooh and Tigger, right? And what happened was, in the end, that Winnie the Pooh is now banned on Chinese social media. Right, you cannot post a picture of Winnie the Pooh on Chinese social media because to do so is an affront to President Xi. Now, that says a lot about China as a country, right? But what it also shows is, and I'm going to say this because I don't live in China anymore, and I ain't going back. The government are cowards, right? If you are an authoritarian government that is terrified that the strength of your reputation will be diminished by Winnie the Pooh, then how strong is your grasp on power? Right? Like famously, authoritarian governments have always cracked down on comedy, censored speech, satire, especially cracked down on. But the reason that nobody remembers that Obama was Tigger was because Obama never brought it up. Obama was never like, oh, don't call me Tigger, I hate it. It's like being a weak kid at school where people call you Condom because your name's Dom and condoms are rude and you're like, oh, don't call me Condom, and so everyone calls you Condom forever because you've said you don't like it, right? The minute that you, as the Chinese president, one of the most powerful people in the world, probably the most powerful person, because the president of America has checks and balances on them and the president of China doesn't. So if you are the most powerful person in the world, and you're like, oh, don't call me Winnie the Pooh, then all you are doing is showing how weak your position is, right? How desperate you are to, oh my god, we're on shaky ground here. And if somebody thinks that I look like a children's cartoon character, then, oh, I don't like A.A. Milne, said President Xi. And that is one of the reasons that Pussy Riot have been so successful in Russia as well, because every time they release one of their anti-Putin tracks, or they do something against the Russian government, they're like, yeah, stick them in prison. And then everyone knows about it, because they stuck them in prison. Like, after the World Cup, they stuck them in prison, and everyone knew about it. Whereas if they'd just gone, who's that? Oh, I don't know, it was someone.
Yeah.
Right, and that is exactly the case with Navalny here. Navalny is now touted as the leader of the Russian opposition against Putin. But Navalny himself was just an anti-Putin blogger for a long time. Like, that was it. That was basically all he did. He was a blogger and he spoke out against the government. Not many people spoke out against the government. And as we spoke about in our previous one, all of the most famous leaders of the Russian opposition die. Right, that's pretty much it. As you, if you're in Moscow, if you're in Novokuznetskaya in Moscow, you've gone for some drinks. You know, you're out in the city, you're partying, and somebody says, "Hey, why don't we walk to the Kremlin?" And you're like, "Sure, it's only a 15-minute walk from here. Red Square's nice." So you walk to Red Square, but to get from Novokuznetskaya to Red Square, Dave, you've got to cross the bridge. All right, you've got to go over the river. So you go over the river, and as you're going, you look to the left, and you go, why are all of those flowers there with a photograph of this man who I don't recognise, or vaguely recognise at best? Well, the reason that there's a photo of a guy there with flowers surrounding it was because he was Putin's opponent, and he was shot to death on that bridge, right in front of the Kremlin. It would be like if Keir Starmer, leader of the Labour Party, was shot to death on Westminster Bridge, opposite the Houses of Parliament, right? Like that's how flagrant it is. They didn't try and kill him in Siberia. They killed him outside the Kremlin, 20 feet from Red Square. I'm like, oh yeah, sorry about that. And that's what happens if you're the leader of the Russian opposition, right? So Navalny was just like a blogger. He said some anti-government stuff. But then in 2020, he was on a flight and he fell ill. And so when he landed, I can't remember where he was flying to and from, but he landed, they took him to hospital, and his assistant, his spokespeople said, yeah, he's been poisoned. And the Russian doctors were like, no, don't be silly, he hasn't been poisoned. And they're like, we want to fly him to Germany to get him treated by someone who isn't, an employee of the Russian government. And the doctors were like, no, you can't take him out of it. They got him out and they flew him to Germany. And when he got to Germany, he's been poisoned. Sure. And yes, and the poison may be something that you were well aware of. Do you remember Novichok?
Yes, I remember Novichok in Salisbury, not far from where I live. And about a couple of years ago, when did that happen? A few years ago? Can you give me the year?
It was a few years ago.
Yeah, it's about a year after it happened. For that following year, Salisbury, it was desperate for people not to be afraid to go there, so they made all the parking free and everything. And I went there to go see a comedy show, and my friend, who is often hilarious and sometimes isn't, was walking around Salisbury going, Novichok, Novichok. And initially, the first couple of times it's funny, and then when people start to look at him, you're like, okay, dude, come on, this is a bit much.
Yes, yeah. Well, it was just before the World Cup, really.
Was it?
It was in March of 2018, yeah, which really, that is a big part of why we were so angry at Russia at that time. Because I think there is actually one of the episodes where I shout about how they tried to kill people on our soil, or how they did kill people on our soil. I believe there's an episode where I start shouting about that. And yeah, it was in their attempt to kill Sergei Skripal in Salisbury, and accidentally ended up killing English people while their targets got away. And the Russians have a long history of doing this. They have a history of killing people on British soil. They killed Litvinenko when they poisoned him with like plutonium or something, and then he died of radiation poisoning. They tried to get with Skripal, with Novichok, and Alexei Navalny was the next person on that list, and Novichok was back. Now, the Russian government has always denied that they have anything to do with this, right? They always said, yeah, it was Novichok, but no one knows who makes Novichok. The Russian government is the only organization in the world that makes Novichok, right? So it's an old Soviet poison that was developed in the 70s and 80s. And I think in 2017, the Russian government declared, we've gotten rid of all our Novichok. And then the next year, people started dying of Novichok poisoning. And the Russian government is like, oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. And it's that amazing ability that Putin and the Russians have, and it's an old Soviet tactic of doing something that was clearly you, but fervently denying it, and nobody can do anything about it, right? It's like leaving your fingerprints at a crime scene, but saying, no, I've got an alibi, I was at my wife's house. And you're like, no, but there's a videotape of you shooting the gun with your fingerprints on the gun. It's like, yeah, but I wasn't there.
Yeah, well, it's like we have a audio recording of you claiming to...
Of you shooting a man.
No, audio recording of you claiming to sexually assault women on a regular basis. And
Right.
But because you're the president of the United States, we're just going to, just forget about it?
Yeah. And that's exactly what happened with the attack in Salisbury as well, where it was Novichok. They found the two guys that probably did it, and they were like ex-KGB, basically. They're like old Russian intelligence agents. And they were like, no, we were just on holiday in Salisbury to see the cathedral. And there was nothing that anyone could do about it. That was it. They went back to Moscow. They're like, oh no, it couldn't have been us. We were on the flight 2 hours after the poisoning, so it couldn't have been us because we were already flying back to Moscow completely unsuspiciously after the poisoning took place. Were you fleeing the scene? No. But Novichok, again, this poison was used on Navalny, and the Russian government went, no, we didn't poison him. But when it's your poison, and everyone knows it's your poison, and it's people that you don't like who are being killed by your poison, and you're going, no, because nobody can do anything about it.
But why not? Right? That's so frustrating. Why can't anyone do anything?
Oh, because they can't prove. Right? They know it's a Russian-made poison used by Russian agents on Russian targets, but because they can't literally find the paper trail of Vladimir Putin saying, please kill this man using this poison in Salisbury, right? What's Theresa May going to do about it? Theresa May was the Prime Minister at that point. Like, what they should have done is close the border to all Russian citizens and expelled the ambassador of Russia and cut off trading ties and gone, this is unacceptable, and the EU and America should have followed suit. Instead, it was like, no, we can't prove anything, so it's fine. And that's why Russia gets away with all the terrible things that it does. And Navalny is a really interesting case because unlike Litvinenko, who fled Russia because they were going to kill him, and unlike Skripal, who fled Russia because they were going to kill him, they tried to kill Navalny, and he was sent to hospital in Germany to recover from Novichok poisoning, and then the fucker went back. After he left hospital, they flew him back to Russia. He flew back to Russia on his own accord.
Gangster.
To be like, what you got? You've already tried to kill me. What else are you going to do? And they went, we're going to put you in prison. And that's pretty much what's happened, right? There's very little evidence of anything that Navalny has done that is illegal other than speaking out against the Russian government, right? He spoke out against the Russian government, so they tried to kill him. Then he fled to Germany, and everyone knew, well, he didn't flee to Germany. He was dying, so they took him to Germany. And when he was there, the whole world found out about him. So when he went back to Russia, they're like, we've got to put this guy in prison. And once again, the Russian government have made a superstar leader of the opposition out of some random blogger who was bad-mouthing them on the internet. And they've empowered him, firstly, by trying to kill him, and then by, when he returns to Russia, they put him on this big global podium. Basically, he's been on hunger strike. Like, he was a handsome man, Navalny, I wouldn't say he's a Kasper Schmeichel, but he was a handsome man. And now, after months in prison, I can't remember if they put him in a labour camp. That sounds familiar. But he went on hunger strike. He's slimmed down. He's gaunt. He has been willing to literally put his life on the line and then go back and face the consequences for it in opposition to the Russian government. And so what the Russian court has done now, and this is within the last few days, they've outlawed organizations that he founded. Basically, they've called them an extremist organization. It's just attempts to silence opposition to Putin again, and the more they do it, the weaker the government seems, because they're unable to stand any kind of opposition. And if you as a government aren't strong enough to face opposition to your power, then you're Winnie the Poohing yourself. You're Winnie the Poohing your pants every time a Navalny appears. And the idea, of course, by outlawing these groups, like they've done things where they said being part of the group is a crime. Having shared information that the group has put out is a crime, because they've labelled them this extremist organisation. Well, famously, one of the things they put out, I think it was maybe late last year, early this year, they put out a video of this palace by the Black Sea next to Sochi. Remember when we spoke about Sochi, we said, oh, well, that's where Putin has his palace, and the Winter Olympics famously was in Sochi, even though it's the hottest part of Russia, so that they could put all of that money into infrastructure from the airport so that Putin could get to his palaces. Well, there's this Black Sea palace that they got an interior video of, and Navalny's people put it out and said, this is leaked footage of Putin's palace by the Black Sea, and it's ridiculous. It's lavish is an understatement. But then another oligarch came out and said, oh no, it's not Putin's, it's mine. And nobody believes it. Everyone thinks that it's Putin's palace. Yes. Yeah. But there were, when Navalny was being sentenced in Moscow, there were big protests about it. And having lived and worked in Russia and taught in Russia, I know Russians who feel like Russians who are pro-Navalny and Russians who are anti-Navalny at the same time. It's not like a case where everyone is with him and everyone hates Putin. That's not the case at all. Some of especially my younger students, one of my younger students said to me, oh yeah, one of my classmates, he was 16 years old and he was arrested for protesting. And he's been in prison for the last 2 years.
Oh, shit. And
then I've got one of my other students who's like, Navalny is a troublemaker, and what he's going to do is undermine the strength of the Russian government at the time we need it the most. And maybe I don't like Putin, but Navalny is a crazy person, and what he's doing is indoctrinating the young people of Russia with American propaganda. And it ranges on all sides, from Joe Biden is trying to instigate a rebellion in Russia with the school children, all the way up to storm the police stations and free Navalny. It's a crazy time.
That's mad, yeah.
Yeah. However, I don't think any of this is going to affect the Russian team.
Well, their first game's in St. Petersburg. Do you not think you might be able to feel this air of political discontent in their home country?
Probably not in St. Petersburg, because St. Petersburg is Putin's city. It's where he's from. He's generally pretty popular there. There's more opposition to him in Moscow. Moscow's really kind of like any other European city. And then you leave Moscow and you go out, and it turns into what you've seen of Soviet Russia. Moscow is constantly being redeveloped. The center of Moscow looks like the center of London or anything else. But you leave Moscow and you go to Kazan or somewhere like that. And it's still, nothing has developed since the 1970s or 80s. But St. Petersburg is still this grand city of Russian history and majesty, and it's the city where the Putin calls home, and it's where he's it's one of his strongholds. So I think it's pretty unlikely that we would see some discontent there. More likely you would see something in Moscow, but as we saw in the World Cup, when they hosted things in Moscow, there was a real joy of the fans who went to Russia for the World Cup. And it was great for me when I moved there, because before I moved there, it wasn't, nothing was set up for non-Russians, really. And then because of the World Cup, they had to put English everywhere. They had to make things more accessible because there were people coming from all over the world. So when I went to Moscow, it I didn't have any of the old, oh, well, this isn't very international sort of thing. Like, it is an international European city. Like, there's no doubt about that. And I think St. Petersburg has that same feel. And I think just generally Russia in general, unless it's the people that want to storm the police stations, which are, there were protests all across Russia. To be fair, there were in Navalny, there were, but I don't see anything major happening here. Like the biggest thing that could happen is Pussy Riot return, and I would be down for that.
I'd be well down for that. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll release a new single straight afterwards, like they did at the World Cup.
Yeah, what do you reckon you call this one, Dave? If you're Pussy Riot, what would you call this one?
I don't. Well, the track they released after the World Cup, after they stormed the World Cup, was called "Track for a Good Cop."
Yes, because Russian police, famously heavy-handed, shall we say?
Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. It seems like they had a very specific statement to make there, and they even dressed in kind of slightly outdated police uniforms when they ran onto the pitch. So if they were going to return, I don't know what would they be saying? Would you reckon it would be a pro Navalny statement?
Maybe COVID cuck, something like that. Maybe. No, COVID was a weird one in Russia because there was a time where Russia was one of the countries where it was the most serious. At the beginning, especially, it was one of the countries with the most deaths, and because I was there in Russia for the beginning of coronavirus. And now, like, nobody cares in Russia about coronavirus. There's, like, you think about how serious it is for us here. Like, nobody in Russia gives a shit about coronavirus at this point. Very few people are wearing masks. Like, people are going on holiday. They're not leaving Russia so much. The benefit of having a huge country like Russia is you can go on holiday anywhere, But there's nowhere near the same conversation around COVID in Russia as there is in the UK.
Well, I do get this unease about that in the UK because I've been at home, working from home for a good few months, and when I do go out, it's just to walk the dogs or go to the shops or whatever, and I've started to notice that people are not wearing their masks in shops anymore. Even though none of the signage has changed, none of the law has changed, people are just getting more relaxed about it. And it's kind of coincided with summer arriving, so people are in their flip-flops and shorts and vest tops, and I guess a mask doesn't really vibe with that outfit, or whatever the reason is, or it's harder to breathe because it's warmer, or maybe there are more reasonable excuses, but I get the feeling it is more of a relaxation of restrictions, and the people just don't really care about it anymore. They're sick of it. Like, well, fuck it, I want to enjoy my summer, so I'm just going, I'm not going to, if I have to pop into Tesco Express for 5 minutes to get a bottle of sun cream, I'm not going to go get my mask and sanitize my hands. I'll be in and out. Whereas, a year ago it was, same thing, but take every precaution.
Yeah, I think what Russia managed to do quite well was they instigated those 14-day quarantines for people coming into the country. They were one of the first countries to do that, like that. It was like February 2020. They instigated, if you're coming into the country, you have to quarantine for 14 days. It happened so fast that one of my friends in Moscow was caught by it because it wasn't there. Then he went away for the weekend to see family and came back and it was there and he had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Whereas the UK, we didn't do that for months. months and months and months. And in Russia, it was enforced. And in the UK, it wasn't. And I know it wasn't because when I came back from Russia, it wasn't enforced. And I did it because I took that responsibility on myself not to kill my family. But in the UK, we took it seriously in that, oh yeah, but you've got to wear your mask. But they didn't put any rules in place. And then every time things opened up again, it all got worse. Whereas in Russia, they took it reasonably seriously to begin with, and their government paid people to stay home, which, sensible precaution. You can't go and do your job, don't worry about it, we'll pay you to stay home. I couldn't get that because I wasn't Russian, which was frustrating. So I couldn't get the money from the Russian government because I wasn't Russian, and I couldn't get the money from the UK government because I wasn't in the UK. So, that's just how the economy ends up screwing you over. But the Russian government managed to stop new cases of coronavirus entering the country, whereas our country has been constantly hamstrung by these new variants entering the country because they just let people come in and they don't put those rules in place, right? They haven't said, oh, you have to, like the reason that we have an Indian variant or a South African variant and so on and so forth is because they don't take precautions, or they didn't take enough precautions on people entering the country. Whereas the Russians went, we're going to burn through coronavirus, and loads of people died, and it was terrible. And then about 4 months later, they're like, well, there's no more coronavirus because no one else is coming into the country anymore. And that, that was how they culled it, I guess. But it was horrible being there and being terrified of the virus. And you enter a supermarket and everyone is wearing their masks around their neck. Right? They wear their masks entering the supermarket because the security guard says, yeah, put your mask on. And then they immediately take it off once they get past the security guy. And that's it. And, you put your mask on to get onto the metro, to get onto the train. And then, because the police are there to make sure you do. And then you get on and then they take their mask off. And there's like 100, 200 people in this train carriage who have all taken their masks off. And you're stood there like, this is bananas. And so when I left Russia, I was like, oh, phew, I'm safe. And I came back to the UK and it was bananas here as well. So, yeah, the lesson. Move to South Korea because they're not bananas.
Yeah. I hear it's nice there.
Yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, they're not playing in the Euros.
Sadly not. It's not even an Asia Cup this year, I don't think.
So the Kasper Cup, of course, has already been won. Right, we know which team has the best Kaspers. There's not even a competition, frankly.
Do you remember in the World Cup where we said that the Iranian team were ridiculously handsome and they won at least the most handsome team?
They did.
Is Denmark your pick for the most handsome squad of the Euros?
You know what? I'll let you know. Keep tabs of that, and because we'll see as we go. Denmark definitely in the favourites because they have Kasper Schmeichel. But as we said, I don't know any of the Finnish players. So maybe when we see Finland play, I'll be like, hello, Finland.
It's these Scandinavians that you're into, isn't it?
No, it might be the North Macedonians pop up and I'm like, hello, North Macedonia. But yeah, we just haven't got to them yet. We'll see. We'll see how we do. Yes. So now, before we round up our discussion on Group B here, as we've discussed previously, we're keeping a tally of a few things: most handsome team, most Kasper team, who the Golden Boot is going to be, and of course, how many players COVID is going to knock out of the tournament. Now, I have said that if more players get COVID than the Golden Boot scores goals, then this tournament was a bad idea from the start, right? And they should have postponed it. But we're off to a bad start because the tournament hasn't kicked off. It kicks off tomorrow, actually. We're recording this on the Thursday. It kicks off tomorrow, and already at least 3 players have been removed from the tournament for coronavirus. We've got 2 Spanish players, including Sergio Busquets, and one of the Swedish players as well is down to coronavirus. So we're on at least 3 players now.
Are they actually been removed from this whole tournament? Because I just thought the squads were isolating and they caught it early enough that they could at least play. Because surely if someone in the squad has caught it and the whole squad is isolating, then no one can play if it's it's within 2 weeks, right?
I know that these players have to stay in isolation for at least 10 days. And I think this is what they're kind of waiting for now, is whether the coaches decide to drop them from the squad. Maybe it hasn't been decided just yet if they're going to. But, your players it's lucky that it happened now and not on Saturday or Sunday once the tournament kicked off. Because if it was after your first game or just before your first game and, your players are out for 10 days, that's a sizable amount of the group stages, like if not all of the group stages. And you might be thinking, hey, maybe we could do actually with having an extra 2 players on the team.
Yeah, how they've started introducing concussion substitutions like they do in rugby. Maybe they need to be like COVID substitutions, where you can bring somebody out for a couple of games if you're going to be a couple of squad members down, but it's temporary. And as soon as that original player is free to play, then the others have to leave. But then that's a lot of extra travel, isn't it? And we were talking about how the Euros is not going to be great for the environment. It's because of all of the plane travel that these teams are going to be doing. So sticking a few other footballers for another flight probably is not the best idea.
Yeah, I mean, this doesn't quite count for the Euros, but even in the friendlies, you had Scotland playing the Netherlands in a friendly recently, and 6 of the Scottish players had to pull out of the friendly because one of them had coronavirus and had to isolate. So it's going to be
with Spain. Because after Busquets and somebody else tested positive, they had a preseason friendly lined up against who was it, Bulgaria or somebody, and so they just sent the under 21 squad instead. Just kept all the senior squad away, sent the under 21s, and they still won 4-0 or something.
Go on, Spain under 21s.
Well, what happens if an entire senior squad can't play because it's a COVID risk? Will they would have to replace them with the other 21s, would they? Or I don't know. I guess they must have these conversations in the background. What would happen? But what do you think?
Yeah, me and Steve were talking about this, and we predicted it might actually be a chance for Northern Ireland to make their way through to the World Cup. We went through all of the league system. We went through the knockouts, the third place qualifying, and we said if Spain has to drop out because of COVID, then Northern Ireland would be a fair team. Would be in a shout to replace them, which would be great because that would be 4 British teams in the Euros, and that would be something to see.
That would be cool. Yeah.
So watch this space. If all of Spain, all of the Spanish players get coronavirus because of Sergio Busquets biscuits, then maybe Northern Ireland will finally get their chance on the big stage.
So they'll be flying back from their holidays like fuck.
I've been drinking and eating biscuits, and damn you, Sergio biscuits. They'll say. Thank you very much for listening to our discussion of Group B. Dave says Belgium. I say Denmark. There's only one way to see. Next episode, we'll be talking about Group C. And we will be doing that one in person. Oh, yeah. The tournament starts tomorrow. So for you guys, it will already be a few days in. I'm really excited about this, Dave. I'm really excited for the tournament, and when we talk about Group C, maybe we'll even have seen some football. Oh my God!
But surely we will have. Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah, that's really great. But thank you guys for listening. Because this podcast is only going to be around for a couple of weeks, share it with anyone you know that maybe they like football, maybe they like politics, maybe they like Navalny, maybe they hate Navalny, maybe they really hate Winnie the Pooh.
Maybe they love Pussy Riot.
Oh, Pussy Riot!
Pussy Riot!
Pussy Riot, the official band of Who Watches the World Cup.